Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and I have with me Ashley Lorensen, writing under the pen name A.L. Lorensen. Now, her debut book came out last year, and it is For Evergreens and Aspen Trees, which I love that title. And it is the first book of a series, The Songs of Loreland. Did I say that correct?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Um, and Ashley, thank you so much for getting on with us today. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Ashley. I oh gosh, of course, as soon as anything gets asked, my brain goes blank. Um, so I did most of my growing up in Washington, and that's kind of when I started writing when I was pretty young. My dad introduced me to Word on this really ancient dinosaur of a computer. Like it was a huge box and had the green screen and all those other things. And so I played around with it, and I discovered that I really loved like making stories and writing stories. And so I've really been like seriously writing since I was about 11.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that's actually when I started this book. I was inspired by the Ranger's Apprentice series by John Flanagan. I had just finished it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I have to write something. And so I started writing this book. And then I finished it when I was 14. And then because I finished it when I was 14, I promptly started rewriting it. And then now here I am 14 years later with it published and done. So
That's awesome. Having the Rachel's Apprentice series inspire you. Was there any other books that inspired you as you were going along your journey?
oh gosh, so many. So I was that kid that more often than not I had a book in my hands than anything else. And so I just read voraciously. And I watched a lot of movies and things like that. And so going back, I'm like, I don't know if there's a part where I like wasn't inspired by something or other at some point. But because I read so many, I can't like target exactly which ones like inspired me more than others, because I just read a ton.
So it took 14 years before it came out. So were
Yeah.
there long periods of time where you set that down and you're like, okay, I'm going through my life, I want to pick that up? And what motivated you to keep that going?
Yeah. So definitely I would set it down for a couple years and then I begrudgingly go and pick it back up. I'm like, okay, I gotta get this done. And I think what really motivated me to finish it is I that was just like my dream. That was something that I wanted and I loved. And I joke that like the characters wouldn't let me go, because they had kind of come into their own being almost. And so I was like, oh, I have to tell their stories, otherwise they're gonna not leave me alone. And it was also a big part. I have a really busy brain anyway. I haven't been like formally diagnosed with ADHD or anything, but I tell myself that I have ADHD tendencies, because my brain is always going. And so writing was a huge outlet for me. And those became like my friends and everything else. And so I went to that to cope and help my brain. And again, it was just something that I just really wanted to do either way.
So you started at 12, finished at 14. It's 14 years later. How has the story changed? How has it progressed?
Oh, it's gone through quite a few major upheavals. So when I first wrote it, I had the whole story down and everything. And then as I went through and was rewriting it and really trying to add some more of the depth of character and depth of feeling and plot and everything, I realized that I was going to have a huge monster of a book on my hands. And so what I ended up doing actually is I split it in half. And so the second book that will be coming out hopefully sometime this year, um, that will actually be like the second half of what was originally the first book. And there were some characters that I took out and put back in and then took out again or renamed, just kind of all over the place. But it really has gone through, like it is almost completely unrecognizable from that very first draft.
That's something that people kind of that want to write a book. I think it's kind of hard to grasp because you do fall in love with characters and you do fall in love with story and what's going on. And to be able to take stuff out and rename and change, that can be hard for some people. How do you kind of get through that and realize, okay, this is the first draft or second draft or whatever? Like, it's not going to be the finished draft.
Yeah. So that's still a hard thing for me because I'm very much a perfectionist. And so I like my mantra to myself as I'm drafting for the very first time is I'm like, you know what, bad writing is better than no writing. Bad writing is better than no writing. But then as far as cutting goes, it was hard because there's a saying in the author community, and I'm sure in other places as well, to kill your darlings. And so take out the things that you love if it's not working. And I had a lot of things that were not working or just bogging down my writing. And eventually I had to get to the point where I knew I had to let that go to let the story progress. But the thing that helped me feel better about it is I am a giant file hoarder. And so all of my previous writing that I had to take out, characters, all those other things, I have hoarded away somewhere in the depths of my computer. So I can access that at any time if I just want to revisit them, or if, maybe down the line I want to rebuild them into something different. And that made me feel better that it's not completely lost. It's still somewhere at least there for me.
You gave three great points there. And, the first one I want to hit on, bad writing is better than no writing. I am a perfectionist too. And I know, there's plenty of us out there who feel like that they just get so frustrated because things are not perfect that they don't write.
Yeah.
So that's a great mantra, that bad writing is better than no writing. Two, kill your darlings. I know that um, I've interviewed other people like Peter V. Brett, one of the first book that he did, The Warded Man, like he had to cut like 60, 80% of it. I don't remember the exact number, and to restart, or that those things happen, like the, kind of relates to the first mantra that, bad writing is better than no writing. And
Mhm.
then three, for those perfectionists, that's a great habit of putting those into a file, those characters, the plot, or whatever it is, the ideas, and be able to reuse them later. I know plenty of authors who have had those things in a storage file and have been able to even create whole new worlds and whole new books and whole new characters for that. So those are great writing tips. So you're
Thank you.
working on book two now. What are some of kind of your writing habits, and how have they changed throughout the years?
Yeah. I think the biggest writing habit that has changed is how I like approach that first draft. It used to be that I was completely allergic to any sort of planning ahead of time. Because like, oh, mind maps hurt my brain. I hate them. They're the worst things on the planet. And in all of like your school classes, when they're teaching you how to do creative writing or anything, they just make you do mind maps, and ugh, they're just horrible. Um, and so for a long time, I was just like, I'm not going to plan anything. I'm just going to go by the seat of the pants. I know where the story is going. Um, and then as I did that, I realized that I was really slowing myself down, because I'm like, okay, I know it has to go from point A to point B, and I want to get there somehow, but this middle part is really screwing me up, and I can't like go to this next part without getting this one done. And I just agonized over it a lot. And then over the past like 2 years, I've been taking a lot more writing classes in general on just like how to better market, how to write better and faster. Nick Stevenson paired with another author, and oh my gosh, I'm terrible because I've forgotten his name. His first name is John, but that's absolutely not helpful at all. Um, anyway, so I took a class from them, and one of the things that the author John, and I'm so sorry I don't have his last name, that he recommended it that I really liked is you get just a whole bunch of index cards. And what you do is when you go to sit down to start your novel or whatever you're working on, you write all of the ideas down that you have for any sort of scene, really anything that happens. And then you can spread them out however you want to. It doesn't matter what order they come in your brain. You just write them all down. And then you can collect them all together, and you can decide which ones you don't need, which ones you still want, which ones you need to add, and then you can kind of put them together. And then what I do is I actually put them into little rings, um, where I have them all in order, and then I can go through, and on whatever day that I'm writing, I'm like, okay, this is the scene that I want to do today. It doesn't have to be in any sort of order, and then I'll check it off when it's done. It helps me see exactly when like I'm gonna be done, so it doesn't feel like a forever slog to get there.
Mhm.
And it keeps me way more on track, and I don't have to do as much like deep plot editing when I edit in the future.
That's another great tip or trick. He's, 97, fall of 97, he said, if you're writing a 10-page research paper, get 20 index cards and fill them up with the quotes that relate to your research, and, put them however you want, and use 2 quotes on each page, and then your just filler in there. And then, that's your research. It's so much easier. And I've seen authors do that as well. In fact, I think Scrivener, I don't know if you use Scrivener or not, but they have a thing on there where you can, it's literally like a cork board with index cards that you can write
Yeah.
your notes and rearrange them.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
I actually I love Scrivener for that. I use Scrivener for everything. And yeah, so what I would do, like so my writing process, I actually handwrite first. Because like I cannot for the life of me look at a blank screen and make words come. I just can't do it. And so I handwrite everything first. And so I do the same thing with my index cards, is I will handwrite all my index cards and then immediately go into Scrivener and put them all into Scrivener that way.
no, that's great. I'm kind of the same way. I have a notebook here that I usually like. I just have your name on there and your book for this interview. But like, um, when I'm brainstorming on the next page over is my brainstorming for my next novel that I'm writing, and that's
Yeah.
I don't throw anything out. And in fact, it's very disorganized. Like I don't even follow the lines half the time, and then I transfer them over to. I use Scrivener on that and with that cork board and the index cards, and it's
Yep.
really helpful. That's a great tip or trick for anybody that's wanting to learn how to outline or do anything. Like just getting things out of your head and onto paper helps.
Absolutely, 100%.
No, that's fantastic. Do you use like a certain outline system, like 3-act play or a 3-act structure or anything like that?
I do actually. So again, this is, oh, I have to look up that author. I will email it to you because I cannot for the life of me remember. But again, this author that paired with Nick Stevenson, he has a system, and you can kind of change it around however your brain works best for you. But he just calls them like phases.
Hmm.
And so let's see if I can get to the start of this and I will tell you. Oh, so he has a couple different phases. The first one is preparation. And so this is where you're getting introduced to your character, to kind of like what's going on, all those other things, and building up to what's going to happen later. So you start with preparation, and then as you go along, um, he calls them turning points. Um, or game changers is what he calls them. So game changer number one is where you change from like your preparation phase to your next phase. It's that first like switch in the story. And then you go into reaction where your character is like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just reacting to it. And we're going from there. And they're failing a lot. They're stumbling around and they're just reacting as things come. Um, anyway, and so I think there's 5 different phases and then 2 or 3 game changing moments that kind of put the whole story together. So you have a completed arc. You're seeing changes in your character, and you're also not like kind of mired in one spot for too long. Like you don't spend too much time on your preparation phase where you're just like info dumping everything that's going on in the world, or you're not spending too much time in like your middle ground, which is always super like muddy for a lot of authors, including me. Like the middle part drives me absolutely bananas. I'm like, I just want to get from the beginning to the end. What is this middle part?
Who needs growth? Just get there.
Exactly. And so that's kind of how I structure it. And again, with my index cards, what I'll do is I will put the names of all my different phases up at the top. And then once I'm done writing all my index cards out, I will put them underneath the titles of those phases, and I'll make sure that they're all pretty like evenly filled. And then if I have only like 3 index cards in one and then 20 in another one, I'm like, oh, I should probably balance some things out here.
Right. And I'm assuming that probably the game changing moments, it probably has to wrap up, retch up in tension and stuff. It's got to build a little bit.
Yep, absolutely.
No, I love learning about different outlining techniques, because what might work for you might not work for me, and what might work for me might not work for you or somebody else that's listening. So, like, I mean, lots of people look at just the 3-act structure, basic. It's been used for millennia. I think I don't know if it was Plato or Aristotle was the first one to write about it. But then you got like Dan Harmon's story circle that people have used. Dan Wells has a great one that he uses, just a 7-step formula. But to be able to understand and what's going on with the story, I think is key. And no matter what outlining technique you use, to be able to use that effectively. And like I said, like Ashley's might not work, or I guess it's John's technically, but like
Yeah.
whatever, find something that works for you and be able to use it. Because if it doesn't work for you, who cares? Like, if you're trying to do the 3x structure and you just can't get your head around it, why use it? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's fun that you found something that works for you, and you know tying that into that note card thing. I think it's a great tip or trick for anybody to be able to create a story and be able to use that to build tension and have entertainment as well. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you've taken classes. What are some classes that you have enjoyed? And do you have a writing group, or do you have anybody that you look to, or have a mentor or something like that?
Yeah. So oh gosh, I've gone through so many different writing groups because again, I've been writing for 14 years plus. Right now, I use a lot of Nick Stevenson's work because he just does a phenomenal job, and he's super fun to listen to, and really informative, and just wants to help. So I've really appreciated his stuff. And then as far as like my writing group of people that I have right now, I have a group of a couple that I met at FanX of 2022. So last year, Joanna Reeder is a lovely, wonderful human. And I just absolutely adore her. And she has become kind of like my writing mentor, bestie, whatever. She's great. And then Cole and Bo Neville, they're also excellent. Met them all there. And we all write kind of like fantasy sci-fi stuff, but it's all very different, like subgenres,
Mm-hmm.
which I think actually works out for us because then we don't feel like we're having to compete for the same readers or anything. We're just there to help each other out. And then I'm also part of this group called Indie Fantasy Addicts. It's on Facebook, and they have an authors section for that. I call it like the best corner of the internet. It is so fun and so great, and everyone there is super supportive. And I think that has really like helped build my confidence that there are people out there that are looking for the kind of fantasy that I write, but then also like people that are in the same exact boat that I'm in. And we're all just there to help each other out.
Right. And you shared a booth with them at FanX.
I did, yes.
And so usually I ask about marketing and stuff. How was that for you, like going to a convention and selling your book? Because being able to meet somebody one-on-one and be able to pitch your story is so much different than trying to sell online with just a picture and stuff like that. So how did that go? How was that for you?
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. I like basically after that very first day, I was like, oh, I'm hooked. If I could just spend all of my time just going to different conventions and things and meeting readers one-on-one, I would do that in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, I have to have like adult full-time job, whatever else, and that's boring, but whatever. And so no, it was an absolute blast. And it is such a joy and a privilege to be able to meet with like my people, essentially, like the people that have the same likes and dislikes as I do and like are just giant nerds. Like I love that. And I call myself like an extroverted introvert. Like I really enjoy like my own time, but I also just really enjoy people in general. And getting to talk with them and interact with them is in person is so much better than online. Not that online is terrible, and I've met a lot of really excellent people there. But I kind of see it like how I do my handwriting. Like I can connect much better in person on a physical space than I can online.
So like I said, you shared a booth. Your booth had, I don't know, like a dozen authors or so. It
Yeah.
was a shared group. How is that for you? And what's the advantages to that versus having your own booth?
Yeah. So that again, that was a really just great time. We had a ton of fun. And a huge benefit of it was again, we were all fantasy authors, but we all like were just different enough that we weren't like sniping readers from other people. We were all just like, hey, what kind of books do you like? Oh, I don't have that book, but this one, like couple stores down, like they're great. And anyway, so we just kind of did that. And I think we worked really, really well together, which I know not everybody has that same like good luck with just a good group of authors that they find. The benefits that I found from it were first, I mean, this was my very first event that I had ever gone to, so I had no idea what I was doing. It was also a last minute thing. Somebody else had dropped out, so I had 2 weeks to prepare. So I was
Wow.
really just like fish out of water. I was like, I have no idea what's happening. I'm just here to have a good time, I think. Um, and so I was able to kind of like watch and observe and see how they were doing, and pick up some really good tricks. And I think that that is just a huge benefit to finding an author community in general, is just picking up those things from them. The other benefit is cost. A booth at FanX is like over $1,000 at least. And that's for like a mediocre one. And so being able to join up with a whole bunch of people and kind of fit into that space, it makes some of these bigger events much more accessible to somebody like brand new to the market like me.
Right. And it was a fantastic booth. The Zangaris were there, Christopher Russell there, Rob Grimmer. Like, he had a bunch of people. And I like what you said. Like, you were all different enough to where, like, oh, you might not like my stuff, but Joanna's right here that you might like her stuff, or somebody else. You can point into whoever, so you guys can help each other out. So you said you were the last one in. What kind of contest did you make that somebody reached out to you and be like, hey, we have a space, do you want to come in?
Yeah. So it's actually through that Facebook group, Indie Fantasy Addicts. We were all part of that group. And they had, I think it was Rob actually that had posted, and he'd said, hey, look, I have this giant, plat full of books that I've never had this giant thing of books shipped to my house before, because all of the authors had shipped it to him. And he said, and it's for FanX. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And so I just, commented on the post. I said, that is amazing. If ever you guys need like an extra person or something like in following years, hit me up, let me know. And he's like, okay, cool. And that was about it. And then a couple weeks later, somebody dropped out and he's like, Ashley, do you want to come join in this? And I was like, heck yes, I gotta get everything done. But I like my books, this was how like close we cut it. The books for that event of mine, I had to essentially bribe my UPS driver, and I met him in a parking lot somewhere, and I just like grabbed my boxes out of the back of his van and put them into my car and then drove to Salt Lake.
That's amazing. That happens though. That's one of the downsides of conventions, because sometimes you have to ship your stuff. Luckily for you, like, that was a local convention, but
Yeah.
I know others. I went to Phoenix Fan Fusion, and an author that I'd interviewed, his books showed up the first day of the convention, like, and he was panicking. Like,
Oh gosh.
that happens. So I called when I was talking to Robert and Dan Zangari. I kind of called their booth kind of like the Bard's Tower of the indie publishing world. And for those people who don't go to conventions, and I don't know if Bard's Tower goes to everywhere. I know they go to a few things. It's a bunch of traditionally published authors, fantasy and science fiction, and some of them, they didn't even get their books. So I mean, I talked to a few of them, and they're like, yeah, I only have like these 5 books. So, like, for you guys to be able to do that. And I thought it was powerful that, like, there's such a market for indie published books, that you guys were able to do that. And every
Yeah.
time I walked by, there was a lots of people around. So I thought that was fantastic. So, you're indie published, you're in charge of everything.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the marketing stuff. So, like, how challenging has it been? What have been some of your successes of marketing your book? 'Cause,
Yeah.
you don't normally, people don't write books just to read. Some people do, but like, they want to sell the books and share it with the world. So, like, yeah,
Yeah.
how have you been able to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things is building a newsletter, because that's like my group of people like want to be a part of it. They want to hear about what I'm doing. And I can also tell them about like new releases, things like that. And so those are people that I have like kept and maintained, and they don't just like go wandering off and then forget about me kind of thing. And so that's been a really big portion of it, is like building that up, getting a website together and those things. Um, I am not by any means the best marketer. It's been particularly hard. I actually just left a job that took up a lot of like my emotional and physical time in general. And so I wasn't able to dedicate as much time as I would have liked to. But now that I have more of this time to do that, I am really enjoying, again, just like reaching out to people and talking with them. A lot of social media stuff, a lot of emails and newsletters. I also, one of the biggest things that helps me like build an audience is kind of like quote unquote like piggybacking off of other people. And so we do a lot of things called author swaps where, hey, your book is really similar to mine. So our readers are probably the same. I'll talk about your book in my group and you talk about mine. And then we just swap them. And then we have other people joining and recognizing some of those other things. Because again, that's the nice thing about being an author, I think in general, is very few people are out to buy one book their entire life and just read that one book. Like they want to continue to read and they want to continue to do those things. And so the more that you can pair with other authors and kind of help each other out, it's this big karma wheel that comes back to you and does kind of help get your name out there and things. I also do a lot of giveaways. I'm like, hey, come do this thing, come join my newsletter, whatever else, and I'll enter you for a giveaway for a Kindle or some signed books or whatever else. And so those are some of the things that I've been working on that I think have been the most successful. And then the giant reward from that is just getting people, like this morning I had somebody message me just saying, oh my gosh, I'm 50 pages away from the end of the book and I love it so much. And like that just like makes me feel good. I'm like, okay, all of those years and everything else were worth it. I may be struggling with money right now because being an independent author is expensive. But having those readers that love it as much as they do, that makes it all worth it.
Right. And I've heard like first books don't make a lot of money for indie authors, but like that's why you keep pushing forward, and that's why it can eventually. And those moments where you have those readers reaching out and say, "Man, this is so fantastic," that's fuel and motivation to keep going.
Yeah,
That's what you kind of
absolutely.
want when you're putting books out. So, like I said, and I want to bring up a point that from a previous question that you said, but you said you got that invitation to join the booth because you had already commented and say, hey, if you need I think that's so important to be able to have the courage to reach out and say something and not just be I'm there are people in Facebook groups that are lurkers that love to read and love to see everybody's progress and
Mhm.
stuff like that, but they don't comment. And those comments and being able to just reach out and say, hey, like, I love your stuff or whatever, can be a key and can be like a seed that can grow into some sort of relationship that can help you and help whoever you're commenting about in the future. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. That was such a key moment that you did that I think is important. And as introverts like me, like that's scary, right? Like that's
Yeah.
and that can be hard for some people. But the more I interview people and the more I've talked to people just at conventions and stuff, that I find that that's a key. Like one of the top 10 things that I've learned talking to people is getting out of your comfort zone and be able to reach out and talk to people. I think that's key.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think too, something that I got hung up on a lot when I first started marketing is I'm like, I just have to talk about my book all the time and I just have to try to sell, sell, sell. And I've really found that like my more successful marketing is when I'm just like interacting as a human. And I'm just like, hey, I have this cool thing, or oh my gosh, we have similar interests. And like when I just really market more of, and market in quotes here, but like market more of myself and am just, you know, just myself with people, and start conversations rather than sales pitches.
Right.
That's where I've been more successful.
No, that's a great tip or trick. Like I said, you're in charge of everything: editing, cover artist. Um, how did you find your editor?
Yeah. So my editor, I actually found, there is a website called reedsy.com, REED as in dog SY. And the reason I chose them is you have like websites like Fiverr and other things where you can find really good professionals, but they also don't, like go through and check them very well. And so a lot of the times you can find a lot of people that are just out to get your money and then not give you any of the work.
Right.
So I was really concerned about that, especially because I am doing it all on my own and that's expensive stuff. And so I was looking around trying to find a website that like really vets professionals well. And I found Reedsy. Reedsy is super excellent. I am not by any means sponsored by them. So this is free advertising for them. But they vet all their professionals. They have all the different kinds of editors. So I went through 2 different professional edits. I did an editorial assessment. And so I went through one editor for that. And then I did line edits and all those other things through a different editor. Just because I'm like, you know what, if you have to read through it multiple times like I do, I know I miss things. And so getting multiple people looking at it is great. And I found them both through Reedsy. Excellent. Loved them. Reedsy also has a whole bunch of like cover artists, interior designers, formatters. I think they have like marketers and other things too. Anyway, they've got a ton of stuff there and it's awesome. As more of a freebie though too, I did have a friend of mine who was just like really invested in just like wanting to read this book and all these other things. And so I was like, here, I mean, you can read this if you want. And she read through it and she ended up being like a free editor for me because she was so good at finding things. And so I think for this next book, I'm just going to up and pay her for it because she did such a stellar job for me.
That's fantastic. Did you go through like alpha readers or beta readers or anything like that as well, or just the 2 edits?
Because I had been working on it for so long, I didn't necessarily do that, and I didn't have the reader base to like send that to.
Right.
My friend Aria that ended up doing some of the edits and stuff, she was kind of like a beta reader for me. And then like all growing up and stuff, I've been sending it to a whole bunch of people. My dad, bless him. So in my book, I actually have it dedicated to him. And I say, you know, for my dad who read every draft and still loves me, because he read every single draft, even from when I was 11 years old. And it was horrible hot garbage. And he was just like the sweetest, nicest about it. And he doesn't even like fantasy. Um, and
Yeah, you
so
should have dedicated it to him.
yes, 100%. He earned it. And so he was really great. I would send it to like all of my high school teachers and things. And so I was like that annoying kid that just wanted everybody to read it all the time. And I think because I did that so much younger, and then I did so much of my own self-editing, when I finally got it to this point, I felt pretty confident in not having to necessarily get it out to a whole ton of other people. And so my developmental editor, who did my editorial assessment, she kind of sort of functioned as a beta reader, and then I went through and fixed it and then had a couple other people look at it.
Nice. That's fantastic. Did you use Reedsy as well to find your cover artist?
I did not actually. So for that one, I was looking at Reedsy, but I just wasn't like finding the vibe necessarily that I wanted. And there was, through one of my other author groups that I was on Facebook, somebody said, oh, there's this website called, it's the Cover Designer Directory. So it's coverdesignerdirectory.com. That one also great because it's just a whole bunch of freelance cover designers. And, you know, they go on there, they post some of their work that they've done, and they do it by genre. And so whatever type of author you are, you can go look up the genre that you're looking for, and see some of the things that people have done, find one you like, and then you get routed directly to their website, and then you can talk to them one-on-one. And so that's what I did for mine. Her name is Timea. I think she's in New Zealand. Anyway, she was spectacular. I think she only had to do 2 drafts before we were just done, and it was beautiful, and I almost cried, and it was great. And so I am more than happy to continue to use her for the rest of the series.
That's fantastic. No, it's a beautiful cover. I'm looking at it right now with the 2 rings and, you know, the foliage and stuff. Like, it's pretty awesome. Like, I like that. It looks like a magical world, like, already. So you know what you're kind of getting into, which is the point. Like, you don't
Yeah,
want to give the wrong message on your cover. So that's fantastic.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know, you're working on book 2 now, hoping to come out this year. How many books are you planning on?
So for this series, I am planning on 5. And there's also a companion piece that I'm working on, that will be some like short stories and other things set in the same world as that. And so that's what I'm planning for those. And then I have some other like spin-offs and things that are eventually going to happen for this series, because I spent so much time in this world. It's all just come into being, and so I think this is going to take up the majority of my adult life. It's just working on this whole series. And then I'm just working on some other like smaller projects on the side. I'm thinking about doing a Kindle Vella story, and things like that. So
That's fantastic. What have been some of the challenges as you've been moving forward, planning out the whole series? 5 books isn't a small task by any means. Like, um, what are you doing to kind of keep continuity and stuff like that throughout the series?
yeah. So for continuity, what I actually do, so I have, obviously my index cards and things that we talked about. But also what I do is I have a thing that I call an idea dump. I have notes on my phone for it. It's just like in a note-taking app, and then I have a couple other places that I'll just write things down, and any sort of idea that comes to my mind that I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I need to do that, I will just write it down in my idea dump. It doesn't matter how like gross, nasty the handwriting is or anything. I'm like, this is just where my ideas are, and I keep that there. One of my editors as well was actually really kind, and she gave me this document when she was done that has like all of the places that I've written about, as well as all the characters and some of their stuff, um, and things. And so I think that's a really good document to keep. And I wish I'd thought about that when I was doing that first book, so I didn't have to like flip through all my pages again. So keep track of that stuff is my recommendation for anybody that's writing a series. But then, yeah, the idea dumps, everything else. And then I hate waiting, especially when like I'm super motivated to write something. And so if I have a scene or an idea or something that I just really need to write down, I'll just write it down and then I'll save it for later.
That's a great tip or trick. Great advice. Um, you know, Not only like just have an idea dump or whatever it is, whether that's on your phone, whether you keep a small spiral notebook in your pocket, whatever. Like being able to think of things and be able to write down at that moment is very, very important. Like I've thought of things and like, oh, I'll write that down later, and I can't remember.
That is
You
the
know,
worst lie I tell myself is, oh, I'll remember it later. No, always a lie. Don't do that.
yeah, get it out now. Get your phone and write it down. And everybody has a phone. Whatever phone you have usually has some sort of note taking capability, whether it's notes on your iPhone or whatever Android has. I don't even know. Like they got something that you can put something. Send a text to yourself, or send an email. Like there's ways to be able to get that from your head out onto paper so that you can remember it later on. That's great advice.
Yeah.
So a day in the life of of Ashley, like what do you do? Like what are some of your daily habits to keep you on track?
Yeah. So my daily habits kind of went out the window for a little bit, like I told you. Especially because like after I finished that book, I was like, I need a break. That was so much.
Right. It is.
It was. And so definitely take breaks. Maybe don't take breaks as long as I have. But some of the things that I do day to day is I love making to-do lists. I love being able to check them off. That is like a huge serotonin dump for me, is if I can just like mark it off on a list. And so I'll make a list of the things I need to do for that day. Um, every day I do try to interact with readers in some way, shape, or form. If that's just like commenting on something on Facebook, in like one of the reader groups that I'm part of, I'll do that. Um, I'm working on trying to build a TikTok following. That's a little bit up and down. We'll see. The algorithm's super weird, so we'll see about that. Every Friday I send out newsletters. Those are really, really important to stay pretty consistent about. And then just as far as writing goes, I have found I do my best writing when I try to do a little bit of something every single day. And it doesn't even have to be a lot. Like even if I just write a single sentence for that day, my brain is still in that developing and working on it. Even if like physically I only wrote a sentence, I'm still like, okay, I know this is going to happen, and then this and this and this. Um, and I don't always do that. And I do take breaks and things, especially with this other job that I was doing before, because it just demanded a lot of my time. But like I said, I do my best work when I just write every single day, give myself an hour, something like that, and just handwrite, get it done. And having those scenes planned out already, I know exactly what I need to be doing for that day. And so that's just more helpful for me.
That's fantastic. Like all that stuff. Like people could just listen to that, and it's just gold. Like being able to do something every day. One of my favorite stories is I think Jerry Steinfeld would have a calendar above his writing desk, and every day that he wrote a joke or so, something like he would put a red X on it, and his goal or his mantra was don't break the red chain. And so being able to do something every day, it does keep your head in that space and be able to keep going, even if it's like a sentence, like you said. I love the newsletter every Friday. I love being consistent. I think is key in doing anything. Um,
Absolutely.
what kind of software or like who do you go through for your newsletter?
For my newsletter, I go through MailChimp. They're pretty great, and they start. So I've built up my newsletter a little bit, and so it's a little bit more expensive now. But starting out, I think it's only like $10 or $15 a month, and I think you can even do free for a little bit for them. But they're super easy to use. I was also using them at my other job, and so like it just kind of crossed over, and my knowledge went both ways, and so I wasn't like bothered about using it. But I've also heard really good things about MailerLite. Those are kind of the top two that I've heard for authors in particular in sending out those newsletters and things.
No, that's fantastic. And what you were talking about earlier with the newsletter swap or being able to do like an author swap or exchange, I think is great. Being able to put yourself out there, being consistent and doing the things that you need to in order to sell your book and be consistent in writing as well as, I mean, those two things are, I think are undervalued. There's lots of people who don't write that think, oh, it's easy to write a book. It's easy to do something like that, but it's not. Like, we don't realize how hard it is to be consistent to write. And I don't know how long your book is, but like average book is like 100,000 words, right? 70 to 100,000 words. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot. Like that's people don't realize how hard that really is.
Yeah. And even with it just being like volume alone, that's a lot. But then like making it quality volume,
Right.
that yeah, it is. It's a lot of work.
Then not only that, be able to sell your book is a lot of work. Like
Yeah.
there's the art side to it, and then there's the science side where you have to like market and do all that stuff. Even there's science side to it of writing a good book, understanding structure and understanding character development and stuff like that. Like it's you got to use both hemispheres of your brain, that's for sure.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Well, that's fantastic. Ashley, thank you so much for getting on with me today. Go ahead and tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, a hold of your book,
Yeah,
and sign up for your
absolutely.
newsletter.
Yeah, so you can get a hold of me at my email address. It's just AL Lorensen, LORENSEN at gmail.com. I do have a website. It's ALLWrites, WRITES.com. I sell ebooks and signed paperbacks through there. You can also sign up for my newsletter on that website. But if you're like not sure about like getting a signed book, whatever else, basically my book is sold anywhere that books are sold. So you can get it off Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And my brain just blanked on all the other ones, Target, Walmart, like really anywhere that you buy your books, you can get them there. And yeah, and if you do join my newsletter, I do have a free short story that I send out to all of my newsletter people that is set in the same world as for Evergreens and Aspen trees. It's just a couple hundred years before. So if that's something you're interested in, I am happy to get all of the extra readers because I just love interacting with you guys. So
That's fantastic. Before we close off, do you have any last minute tips or tricks that you want to share?
oh gosh,
Put you on the
be
spot.
consistent. Yeah, be consistent for sure. But and be willing to learn. I am constantly learning, but I am finding as I learn more, I love it more. And I'm realizing that this is really like what I want to do with the rest of my life. So be willing to learn, be willing to step out of your comfort zone for sure. The more you talk to people, the easier it gets. But all in all, just remember that you're doing this because you love it and because you like it. And the rest of it will fall into place if you put your passion there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Are you going to any conventions this year?
I'm planning on it. I'm planning on being at FanX again. I think I'm also planning on doing the Salt Lake Christmas gift show that they do in December. And I'm looking for some other opportunities to do some earlier in the year as well. I haven't found any yet, but hopefully eventually I will make it to some of those other ones.
So if you see her at a convention, go up and say hi.
Please do. I love seeing everybody.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Carson.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.